Hi, today I want to speak to you why we need to take relationships very slowly, that we have to build a habit of love, and how real relationships are actually built extremely slowly. I mean this in terms of, meeting someone for the first time and first impressions to someone who's been married for 35 years. There's a line that I came across recently by Fulton Sheen, and it states, "What started out as a passion of love becomes an act of love and then a habit of love." And it's one of those rare statements that says more in 16 words than a book of like 200 pages. When I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, it's just so true because it's that middle part, the act of love, acting in love, rather than thinking about how you feel, or, when the passion has stopped, whether that's after 6 months, a year, 3 years. Often, when you start having babies, that's what most couples say. That's where things sort of really change in our relationship. And believe me, that's not a reason not to have kids. Everyone knows that. Has, you know, been married and raised children, that it's the greatest gift that they could have received. But and then once a habit is built, it's so easy. Right now, I'm trying to get out of a specific habit that I have. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's like those darn habits the bad habits seem so easy to create, and the good habits seem so challenging to keep. But yeah, like in our modern culture where relationships tend to move fast and then fall apart even faster, we've become fluent in the first and third parts of that statement I just said to you. Like what made me do a little bit more research on this is I had a client, a man, and he's on the dating apps and he's serious. He wants to look for somebody, or find somebody, I should say. He's at that time of his life that he wants a companion for the rest of his life. And he seems to have no problem meeting people online and having that first date. But then there's been a couple times now where all the passion is there, where they actually talk for, 2, 3 hours a night for a week or something like that. I mean, maybe that's a little bit overboard, but like they seem to get to know each other a lot. And then they set up the first date. And again, it's a very passionate date. Not something I would recommend, by the way, because when emotions rise, logic, fades. And this was a great example because then all of a sudden the communication seems to slow down a lot after that first passion type of date. It's far from acts of love after that because it's radio silence. That's what tends to happen. So, yeah, passion, that's easy. That spark of attraction, desire, emotional connection. I mean, it ignites quickly, right? A spark. And it tells us, oh my God, this is it. But that habit piece, I mean, eventually couples, like many couples, fall into a rhythm, like I was saying, and it tends to not be a good one. They get very used to one another. They have certain expectations of one another, and they just assume this one person's going to just continue to maybe go over and above or love them no matter what. And then, that's a good habit being abused by their partner, but then there's these other daily gestures that aren't great that start to become second nature. The aggressiveness or the shortness or the dismissiveness, the rejection, the resentment, the spite, things like that just start to become second nature. Rising voices, cursive words, criticism, defensiveness, another big one. All of a sudden that's become second nature. But yeah, let's bring it back to the middle part. The act of love is where relationships thrive. if they continue to do acts of love. And when that's not happening, the relationship collapses. So let me expand on this a little bit more. In the literature that I've been reading, which is mainly like theology, Christian theology, they talk about Eros and Agape love. So Eros, eroticism, that's that passionate, erotic type of love, what gets two people attracted in the first place. But the agape love, that's sort of the everlasting love. That's that contentment, that companionship that couples, sometimes in their later years just realize, this is what it's all about. This is what feels good. Like, sort of like I'm living with my best friend now. But yeah, just like my client, a lot come to me heartbroken after that really swift withdrawal from them, it seems like one morning, you're receiving these lovely good morning texts and sweet emojis, and then the next day, week, you're met with distance and silence. And it's crushing for the person, absolutely crushing. You think you have something real, and I don't doubt that they did, but that was likely Eros and not Agape. So again, Eros is exhilarating, that kind of love. It's very romantic. It's what we look for in a novel. Heck, I mean, I haven't watched Disney movies, for a very, very long time because my kids are adults. But I mean, it's all the Disney movies as well. This beautiful woman gets swept off her feet by her prince and they live happily ever after. They don't show that middle part on those types of movies. But I mean, Fulton Sheen noted that if you rush into love, it is usually Eros type of love and it's not agape. Eros is necessary because it draws us together, but it cannot sustain a relationship. It will never sustain a relationship on its own. It is simply the invitation to that covenant that you're about to build. Agape is deeper. It's sacrificial love and it takes time. It is, what Thomas Aquinas once stated, to will the good of the other. You just want good to happen to that person. Another quote from Thomas Aquinas was like something along the lines of, it doesn't ask, what do I feel? But rather, what does love require of me today? Isn't that a great thing to ask yourself every single morning? What does love require of me today? Or we could say, what does God require of me today? How do I handle this? And that's what I feel like you need to kind of get some higher, like, help, because it can be really, really, really hard. The agape that I'm speaking of isn't proven by that initial spark, but how two people respond when that spark is just a mere little flicker now, barely seen. That's what agape love is. What happens when the flame goes out. The most difficult part of love, in my experience, and as I see in my own marriage, continue to see, is not falling in love or maintaining loving habits. It's the daily decision to act in love, especially like I say, when it's inconvenient or worse, unreciprocated. I think that, something happened to me even over the weekend where it just seems so hurtful or unfair or unjust. And I'm expected to just treat this person with love after receiving that. It's almost like you kind of start to think, at least this is me. And I think like with most women, like, because to me, women are associated with justice. I don't know if it's because we're such nurturers or protectors of our children. We would die for, I mean, men say the same thing about their children, but women especially, because like we bore that child in our womb for 9 months, and we have such a strong bond with that child that if that child is ever in any sort of danger, I don't care if it's bullying. I don't care if, a bee stung them, falling off their bike, or your teenager going through a heartbreak, right? Like we're just like justice, where's the justice sort of thing? And we'll fight to the ends of the earth for them. Like, and with our partners, like we seem to want that same fairness. We want the score to be even, but love doesn't keep score. That's what we have to keep in mind. There's only one judge on this earth, and it's not us, even though we want to be that. Our job is not to mete out justice, but to love anyway, despite it all, just as Christ did for us. It's so hard. Like, most days, do we deserve that type of love? That we know that God and the Mother Mary always is giving us that compassionate, like unconditional love that I know, I'm receiving despite all my flaws. I mean, you would think that at some point God would turn away, but that doesn't happen. So we need to be more like him. And acting in love means always doing what's right, not what feels good. It means cleaning up their mess, even when you're exhausted. Like I walked into the kitchen this morning and went to grab a paper towel, and there's no paper towel there. That's just the cardboard, roll. And I'm just like, okay, great. I mean, there's so many examples of that, right? Every single day, you're supposed to just sort of turn away from that, not say a word, love anyway, despite all of it. It's hard. So, yeah. And then with our partners, listening, even when you're annoyed, just still listening. And I'm just going to stop something here. It's apologizing when you feel justified, in feeling the way you do, but still apologizing anyway. And it's so hard to not equate that with being weak. It's not weak. That's not weak. That is really hard stuff to do, but that's divine, and like I gain a lot of my insights from Bishop Robert Barron. I have learned so much from him. And if you like this sort of content, I would definitely start following Bishop Robert Barron. He is a bishop from Minnesota. Uh, and his archdiocese, I think, is right where, oh, what's the hospital? Anyway, I just can't think of it. It's one of the most important hospitals. We'll forget about that point. Okay. But anyway, Bishop Robert Barron, like he frequently shares his thoughts and his commentary on the Gospels. And it feels so good to get back to that sort of structure, in my life. But I think everybody's craving this. It's not, it moves away from all that individualism and what I need and all those selfish tendencies we have, how I feel and what I need and all the stuff that I feel is being taught to our kids out there. Anyway, we need to get back to what he's doing, and that's teaching that true love is not about emotional highs, but it's about the moral will to choose the good over and over again, especially when it's hard. And like I say, we need help with that. It's not easy. But when we move away from that selfish behavior and we move towards the other person, we are becoming more godlike. And that's what we all want to strive for. So, this idea that love is an action, a sacrifice, it's a daily surrender, is embedded in the very nature of what marriage is. The Bible speaks of husband and wife becoming one flesh, and that just isn't metaphorical. It's just like I said, it's very similar to the mother, how a mother carries her child in her womb. It's really two bodies as one. It's one life within the mother. And it needs to be the same with the husband and his wife to become joined in physical and spiritual union. And like I said, it's not easy. So, bring it back to that Eros type of love, the erotic love. I mean, sex, when rightly ordered, is sacred. It's not merely about pleasure. I mean, sex has the power to create life, which makes it so special, but like in the sense that both biological life, but also spiritual life, emotional intimacy, that's what we're looking for. It's that's where the trust comes in and the willingness to sort of continue to do this together, you know. If we treated this union with the reverence it deserves, our marriages would transform. They really would. And this is why most divorces begin with this withholding of love. If couples committed to that, the middle part there, that act of love, even when they didn't feel like it, there would be no need for divorce. Because over time, that act becomes a habit, like I said. And that habit forms character in the person. And that character becomes a bond stronger than any fleeting feeling. And think about it too. You're modeling this to your children. Your children are great witnesses of what's going on in the marriage. And if they see that you're hurting, and kids can tell, right? But you still act in a loving way. And I don't mean like a doormat. I mean, if there's physical, emotional abuse, that's different, but that's not what I'm talking about. Believe me, that's not the reason why there's this number of divorces. Those are rare. It's more that we just choose not to love the other when it becomes tough. And we feel righteous in our decision and just in our decision, like we are becoming the judge. And that's not what we should be doing. So, yeah, it needs to be unconditional, just like the bond between a mother and a child. I have it on my website too. We need to fight. It needs to be fierce. You need to fight for your marriage. And it's hard. That's why it's a fight, because it's a lot of sacrifice, but it's rooted in something holy. So, where do we go from here, right? Well, let's just try slowing down, recognizing that the initial intensity of Eros is not proof of love. That was just the beginning. That was the easy part. That's why you can have multiple partners, is because of that Eros love. But that's not what we should be looking for. That's not a badge to wear at all. And that's so skewed in society right now. It's so sad. You are objectifying the other person if that's the type of love you're looking for out there. We need to give love time to show its true colors. We need to allow silence and space and action to reveal the character of the person. Don't start asking yourself, like, do they make me feel good? But instead ask, is this person capable of agape? And we commit to becoming people who love in acts, not just in moods. And it's because the only way to, that eternal bliss that we want at the end of our lives, at the end of our marriages, it's because we develop that habit of love. That's what gets us there. And that habit is formed one quiet, sacrificial act at a time. Who in your life needs, an act of love from you today? And again, not because they deserve it, but because you choose it. And it's, again, maybe I'm further away from that than you, but I feel it's extremely difficult to do. So that wraps it up for today. And I hope you're enjoying your day so far. And it's springtime where I am, so I'm very happy. It brings a skip in my step, and I hope yours too. If you enjoyed it, let me know. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.